Weirdly, we actually had a bunch of questions from people who kind of wanted to know some stuff about the water in the game. Um, we had a user named Laura Fan 25, clearly a great Tomb Raider enthusiast, who wanted to know if Laura's going to be able to swim in the water, how in general she will interact with large pools of water, and whether water was going to have any significant role in the sort of the dynamic puzzles or the kind of problem-solving areas of the game.
Well, I mean, water definitely. One of the things that the article talked about as far as that sort of opening sequence, water, fire, the dynamic nature of the world is a huge goal, and so buoyancy is just a simple example of how it would relate to problem solving. Is a big goal of ours. So water's definitely puts fire out. If you go under a waterfall, objects will float in using our very cool physics system, and you can light those floating objects on fire to sort of solve problems and escape situations. So yeah, water definitely plays a role. The environment in general is huge because the island is, as we like to say, is sort of a character, and so a main character, and so water, rain, and again fire, mud, all of that sort of the natural elements of the island. We want to actually have gameplay purpose and gameplay reasons to be around, so the player can, think about, okay, I'm in this situation. If I were really in this situation, I would use water in this way, and so it'll work that way. That's the goal. So and that opening sequence, I think, is a good example of that actually achieving that goal.
So, in some of the feature sets, we haven't made final decisions on. So the question relating to whether she'd swim or not, to be honest, our primary goal is to make sure the experience rises to the top, and that if the experience isn't good enough for something like swimming right now, that would not be included. So it's all about making sure that if water is going to play a part, it's to our physics, it's through realism, and it makes it all enjoyable.
Okay. Speaking of the island, then, we have another question from LauraFan25, which I actually should... I think LauraFan25 is actually a collaborative effort of everyone on the Tomb Raider forums, so we have several questions from them.
I bet you it's somebody in the studio who hasn't gotten the memo.
So there was a significant amount of questions from LauraFan, and they were very good. LauraFan25 also wants to know how many diverse regions can we expect on the island, and is the weather going to be dynamic in that it'll affect Laura's objectives and the way she interacts, or is it just kind of something for the mood and tone of the game?
Two-part question. One, we can't at this time talk about the different regions on the island because that's integral to the entire game and campaign. Mm-hmm. And we will over time be talking about specific areas and experiences in those areas. Weather plays a huge part in the game. We've spent a lot of time with animators here, the programmers, building into our existing engine to be able to bring something new in terms of realism to Lara and how the elements affect her. So that does play an absolute monstrous effect. And you should see pretty soon when we start talking about the different regions how that affects her. But yeah, we don't go into too much detail. That's kind of one of those secret things. Yeah. But it's a big deal for us. It's a big deal for us.
Okay.
Sure. Well, Danny Rex was another reader who brought up kind of a compelling question from a little bit of observation that he did on the official Tomb Raider website. He noticed that there's an Xbox Live and a PS Network logo going on up there, which led him to the question of what kind of online options can he expect? Is there going to be DLC, leaderboards? Is there going to be any sort of multiplayer? Any hints in that direction that you can give to Tomb Raider fans?
I think, again, it's a little bit too early. We have a lot of irons in the fire to make sure that we deliver a unique experience, and one which is tailored to the gaming audience of today. So, of course, as with any game of this stature coming out, there are tons of options to be taken into consideration, and right now we have every single one of them on a big board in our office, and we're ticking the boxes as we go along. But as for specifics at this stage, to be honest, it's too early because, again, with all of the attributes of the game, it has to fit within the experience. If it doesn't fit, we're not going to shoehorn it into that box just for the sake of doing it. Everything has to have a purpose.
All right. We have a string of questions here related to combat, and BMW asks, what sort of enemies are there going to be on the island that Lara Croft will be facing? This is something that we've heard a couple of times across the questions. People want to know who they're taking on.
Yeah, I think again, we're trying to introduce the concept in a particular way. The first one is the focus is on Lara first and foremost. We want people to understand the experience that she's going to go through and the situation that she's in. Over a course of time, we will start to introduce enemies and how you come across and how they set in the environment. But right now, our focus of communication is kind of strictly around Lara and where she is, how she got there, why she's there, all the rest of those questions. So I promise, of course, over time we will start getting into that detail, but right now that'll be giving too much away.
All right, well, I might as well just shoot out
I raised about 50 questions.
A couple of more. Laura Fan 25 also asks if there's melee combat featured in the game, and then Heartache wanted to know, this is actually one that we heard over and over again, something along twin pistols, but is it possible to use two handguns at the same time?
Again, I shouldn't keep saying again.
That kind of falls into that category. It sounds like for you guys that
it's something you're looking to expand and roll out later.
Yeah, I think we're constantly testing. Like as Tim and I sit in the room that we're in right now, it's actually a closed off room, part of the focus testing, which we showed you. And for the last 6 months, we have had hundreds upon hundreds of people coming through. We're constantly testing systems. We really want to make sure that we nail it. And nothing falls through the cracks. And sometimes that means having stuff in early on that we think is cool, but when you put it in people's hands after 3 or 4 months, it just hasn't got the fun factor. So we're extremely hesitant to commit to talking about specific features at this stage because it's way too far out. But let's just say this is, without a doubt, one of the most tested and most earliest tested games we've ever worked on. And the people who have been in testing are so heavily NDA'd. We don't even want them to leave the studio. We're going to try and keep them here for the next 12 months plus. But as I say, when the game ships, combat is a big deal for us. As you know, when you were here, we really strive to show you kind of behind the scenes, and both of you will be a little bit more fortunate to see enough to hopefully make you believe that we're willing to take a lot of risks and see what shines through.
Sure. Well, this other arena outside of combat was something that I know you guys you should be able to talk about a little bit more based on what we kind of saw, which was some of the approach to problem solving and puzzles and exploration and that kind of stuff. In particular, we had a reader who goes by the tag "I wish I was Bayonetta." Who
awesome.
Yeah. Who asked. It's been said that the puzzles are going to become part of the survival aspect of the game, so it feels natural and real, rather than the straightforward keys, gears, switches, levers, pressure plates, that kind of stuff of the older games. So he's curious if you could elaborate on what exactly you mean by that. Like how are you thinking it's going to be more organic as opposed to before in the previous games?
Yeah, we touched on it a little bit earlier. I think one of the big keys there is physics, is the physics system, and utilizing that as a way to, get sort of the pieces of all of the puzzles and the problem solving and the sort of what we call survival escapes sequences accessible for the player and intuitive to understand. Because, I mean, generally when you're walking down the street, generally everybody understands what physics, gravity, etc., how they work, and so when you're put into a situation where there's a counterweight system, or like I mentioned earlier, buoyancy or fire, or levers or teeter-totters, anything like that appear in the world, that when the player interacts with them, they actually act the way you would expect. And one of the cornerstones of previous games is that it's more of the sort of the machine, the ancient machine metaphor, and so we're moving more toward that raw sort of, I'm in the situation, what would I do if I were surviving? And so physics is a huge role, and that's how we kind of intend to make that more natural and flow for the player through their head when they're thinking about how to solve a problem. So I guess that's sort of the general thing. Rope, we have a cool rope system that acts the way you would think it would, and we mentioned water as well playing a big role. So all those elements that there's been a few games out there that have also utilized physics, and we've been very influenced by those. So rather than a canned thing that just sort of comes from the designer's head in an abstract way, we want it to sort of feel like a real place.
Sure.
And as you remember from when you were out, one of the core things is showing that this island, before Lara arrived on it, was a living, breathing character, and not just as an island, but also the characters that are on it. So Lara finds herself in situations where, an example was the den, where there was a structure already there. It was in place. It had a use for sifting flotsam and boxes and stuff that came in, washed, and Lara had to use that to try and find a way, being smart, find a way to use it to help her escape. So it's about her going into situations that the player can feel like, wow, I kind of realize that this might be here for something else, but I might be able to get it to do something else for me, and help me get out of this particular situation through using all those physics-based elements.
The other thing I mentioned too is that because it's physics-based and sort of more of a dynamic world, there's a little bit of variability in how you go about, getting out of your situation. Because physics is, has that dynamic nature, the player can, do one thing in a little bit different order than the other, and it's sort of like however they think about it, it should hopefully work that way, and that's the goal when we go through the designs. Of course, those make the designs extremely difficult as well, because you have to account for a lot of different variations. But that also, I think, will be a better reward for the player. So.
And in all the testing we've done, I can't tell you the amount of times we've done stuff that, because of the physics, we're like, oh, that wasn't supposed to happen, but that's actually pretty cool.
Yeah. Hey, bug.
So there's a lot of that. It's like, oh, can we make that work for us?
Yeah.
So, like, with you're talking about some of those kind of like, going for the physics angle of like that unique situation that Lara will find herself in, which I think kind of feeds well into something. Another question that Philip Wessels had, which was about just the namesake itself. I mean, are those physics-based kind of encounters that you're going to be running into, are those going to be in tombs? Like, the name of the game is still Tomb Raider. Does Tomb Raiding still have a role in Lara's development as a character? He asked, in particular, his wording was kind of amusing. He said, "What makes this Tomb Raider and not Creepy Island Survivor?"
Well, she's still, throughout the entire game, yes, there are tombs, of course, it's Tomb Raider. It's just a situation that she has to go through to get into those tombs and get out of them as quickly as possible is very different to anything that we've had Lara do in the past. So yes, the essence of the name of the game is still there. You still have to raid tombs. It's just a little bit of a different experience. And right now, we're in the test phase of sort of 6 or 7 of those modules, so we can't go into too much detail, but let's just say it's not that much of a departure in terms of you still have to raid tombs, you still have to go and get equipment and stuff to be able to help you survive, but a little bit different from the past where you just pick up a jewel and put it in your backpack and it disappears.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not to throw in an example from a sort of a competing franchise, but in Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark, he's in one of the tombs in that, and he crawls up, if you recall, crawls up above and pushes a statue over of Anubis or something. I forget what the statue was, and it crashes through the wall, and that's how he escaped. And that was all physics-based. And so even in tombs, there's still situations where physics will come into play in a very, more raw manner like we were talking about, because she has to get out of there, or she has to accomplish whatever goal she has at the time. So physics can still play a role even in ancient places. So.
Okay. We have a question from Mr. PMS who asks, fitting with the survival theme, how will treating injuries be handled? He brings up the metal spike incident and says that that's not something you're going to just walk off on the real world. So is there anything you can speak to that?
Again, it's putting a real human character, or the feeling of a real human character into those situations. So when Lara gets injured, you will see her injured for a period of time, and that will affect your ability to play in particular ways. So obviously picking up things like health, water, and equipment will help you heal quicker. But I think that the 40,000 foot view is that we are trying to get away from, in some respects, the Teflon-esque feel to